Hey, I'm Jase from Gypsy Tales.
There's Kyrin, and there's Juan from Mortals, and this is Uncommon.
Uncommon is a production by Neuralle, an agency that helps both brands and talent tell their story. To learn more, just visit neuralle.com. That's neuralle.com. So, guests this week, we've got Jase, obviously from Gypsy Tales Podcasts, and we've got Juan and Kyrin from the Mere Mortals as well. When I was putting this together, guys, I realized, so we had a cancellation this week, and I thought, I have not once had a podcast with other podcasters, unless they're, like maybe they're comedians or something like that. So this is the first proper podcasting roundtable I've had, so to speak. And I want to kick things off because I got to say, if you're into podcasting, you've got to be able to talk. So maybe, Jase, you can kick us off and tell us about your earliest memory of not wanting to shut the fuck up.
Oh man, that's literally been my life, dude. It's pretty funny. Like anyone that would know me in my personal life kind of knows that this is probably the perfect occupation. But I think ironically, what actually makes a good podcaster is someone that does want to shut the fuck up. So I'd say that because my show is like not about me. My show is more so about the guests. So yeah, honestly, maybe a gift and a curse, I'd say.
I'd agree with
wanting
that.
To talk a lot.
Yeah,
wanting to talk a lot is like a good thing. You've got to be able to do it, but you've also got to be able to shut the fuck up.
I think with you guys though, Juan and Kyrin, your show is definitely all about talking, right? Because it's essentially the two of you the majority of the time.
Yeah. Now, look, I was going to say, thinking back to the earliest memories of shutting the fuck up, I don't even remember a time when I don't stop talking. So I'm definitely on the side of I enjoy talking, and obviously podcasting does allow that either with other people or with Kyrin. So it's always, great for that. But yeah, it's that balance, right? When you're having conversations with each other, especially on our podcast with Mere Mortals. Yeah, it is all about talking and the research and conversation. But equally, when then we're interviewing or having conversations with others, it is all about the art of, just kind of putting yourself to the side and trying to help them shine through with their own story.
Yeah, I'd actually say I'd never really had the problem of talking too much, exactly the opposite, to be honest. So just by nature, I'm pretty introverted, relatively shy, especially when I was younger. And I suppose getting to the stage where I've probably had the opposite, which was I did get good at listening to people, especially one-on-one. In group scenarios, not so much, but one-on-one, I could really just dial in and let someone speak. And I think that's, we've all mentioned that that's another important part of it is being able to, I guess, be comfortable with silences as well, and letting, the silence create the opportunity for someone to add that extra little piece of information or thought that's going through their head, which, potentially opens up whole new avenues.
Yeah, I had this the other day. I was talking to my partner, and she was saying that from listening to the podcast, she learnt, because she's quite introverted as well. And she's also very, she calls herself very agreeable. And we've had like some problem clients probably in the agency over the last few months with COVID happening. But, people also like to just be a pain in the ass. And she learned that when you go quiet, like, at least from that perspective, it gives people a little bit of discomfort, and it makes them dig, like it sort of almost forces them to dig into what is actually true and not some PR facade. Because that's like one thing I struggle with when I do interviews. I don't know if you find this, Jase, but if you have a high profile guest, sometimes they're so media trained, they just can't break out of the line. You know what I mean? And so,
yeah, you are right. Like I think that's sort of one of the things though that I feel like I'm lucky in the sense with that I think people know when they come on Gypsy Tales, it's like the show where you're allowed to break that mold, if that's like, I think it sort of gives people a license to do that. So I think that I'm lucky in that sense. Like I kind of come across it, But I think at this point now, it's like everyone's like, oh, this is the show where you can go and smoke weed and get fucked up, and like no one will care. Like it's kind of just expected that you'll be a bit of a piece of shit on this podcast.
Okay, that's interesting. Like, yeah, because there are some people we want to have, and maybe it's because of the community like we focus on, but the business space, there's a lot of people who they're just so PR trained. And it's interesting because people will tell me, hey, that episode you had with that person was great and I learned a lot about them, and they're a bit more different than I thought they'd be. They're not just a footy guy, or they're not just this or that. And I just sit there and think like, dude, they didn't say anything. Like they just sort of held it in and were super PR and media trained during the process. When you guys were all growing up, what did you think you were going to be?
Not an engineer. I didn't think that was in the works for me. So that's what I graduated university with, but sort of stayed with that for 3 years. Soccer player was floating in the background for a bit as well, but yeah, it was in the ether, I think, for a huge period of time.
Yeah, I'm going to say, so I grew up in Colombia, right? Came over to Australia when I was 9 years old. And I think the earliest memory of thinking what I want to do was probably just playing soccer. Obviously, once I get through it, I think once I started to learn English and understanding what Australia was like, I probably did have an idea that I wanted to do something scientific or with maths or chemistry, but never would I have thought it's going to come to podcasting. And I actually I became an engineer, then a consultant, now a contractor of sorts, and obviously doing podcasting as well.
What about you, Jase?
Oh man, honestly, like I didn't want to be anything, as weird as that sounds. Like all I wanted to be was like not hating my life, if that makes sense. Like I kind of grew up in like a weird environment around like a lot of really, really unhappy people. And it was pretty like, just, I guess I look back and I think I think a lot of people exaggerate their childhood, but it was just super traumatic. And I just like, I almost didn't give a fuck what I was as long as I wasn't unhappy. And I've kind of done a bunch of just really random stuff. And like, that's sort of where the whole gypsy thing comes from. Like I made a joke with my brother the other day because I've just got like my first employee and not going anywhere through COVID. And then, I was like kind of complaining to my brother because he runs like a pretty sick like sports marketing business. And then he's like, oh, well, like you're growing up. And he's my younger brother. And I was just like, man, I just feel like putting fucking $20 back in my wallet and then just like dipping out again,
Getting out of Dodge.
Honestly, my whole life's goal was just to be not unhappy.
What about the motocross thing? Was that ever there?
Yeah. So I guess like that's probably where the story really starts. But to give the motocross thing context, like motocross was my escape from everything. So I just kind of leaned all the way in. Like motocross was where it wasn't traumatic, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't chaotic. It was just this sport that I could focus on. It brought my family together. I did it with my brother and all of my like good friends. Like that was kind of the first place I found like good influences and good people. So I think I just kind of leaned into that. And then when I figured out that I wasn't going to be like a pro motocross rider, I was like, all right, I'll do whatever it takes to just like stay doing this, to be around these people and doing this. Cause that was kind of what I guess made me happy. So then I started filming, and then I just said yes to pretty much any experience that was going to like keep that show on the road, I guess.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing, looking at everyone's backgrounds. I mean, going on what you're saying, you wouldn't have had any idea that things would eventuate into what it was today with the podcast and the show and the filmmaking, etc. I actually found one of your old show reels. There's old show reel on Vimeo somewhere or something like that. So you're a bit of a decade-long storyteller, but like these guys, I only came into this probably in the last 3-4 years. So I think looking Juan and Kyrin, I think looking at what you guys are up to, it's pretty much engineering. Brisbane born and bred, both of you. well, not born, but pretty much grew up in Brisbane for the two of you, mining. So you must have met at some point during this career stage, or maybe you played soccer together. But why storytelling? Why move from such a conscientious area to this area? Because I was in banking and accounting. I fucking hated it and got into this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a bit of story. So, I mean, me and Kyrin, we've known each other now for about 16 odd years, right, from high school. So we've known each other for a very long time. And what sort of was the change, what got us started actually doing podcasting when we went on it is, I think, for many, many years, we did enjoy listening to podcasts, and we kind of not lost touch, but we communicated with a lot of our friends every now and again, every few months. But we started finding that we communicated best, both myself, Kyrin, and another friend of ours, through audio chats. So we would actually send each other, snippets that are about 10, 20 minutes long of what's kind of happening at the moment. Kyrin headed off and traveled through South America for 14 months. And through all the time, we were just kind of connecting, always chatting, almost weekly, to the point that we started thinking about, we really enjoy doing podcasts. Listening to podcasts, and could we just translate this into having this sort of conversation once a week? And that was sort of the impetus to, okay, once you're back in Australia, let's set something up. Let's just go ahead and do that.
Yeah. And did you have because I remember when I started out, I told myself that the idea was it would make me better at conversations and selling, but really I just thought I was going to be the next Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, like we all do, right? That's got to be a common thing for anyone who starts a podcast.
Yeah, it's always in the back of your mind. I think if you think about podcasting, that name tends to come up a lot, especially after he did that huge deal with Spotify. And I guess as for my background and why I wanted to get into it, similar story. Did engineering, worked in the mines for 3 years. I wouldn't say I hated it, but I didn't love it either. And I got to a point where I just realized how many hours I was spending with it. This was becoming my life. What do I really want to get good at in my lifetime? Is it working on Excel sheets? Is it talking to guys out in the pit? No, not really. What I really was interested in was learning languages, doing calisthenics, meditation, just all these like various branches of stuff that captures my interest. And to be honest, it got to a point after I traveled as well, where I went, okay, like I had, I sent out some resumes just for the hell of it, just to look, and, I had job opportunities, and I went, okay, but do I want to do this? Do I really want to do this? And the answer was a hell no, like absolutely not. So then it was like, all right, what am I going to do? And this was about one of the only things I could think of where it's like, I can still spend time doing all the things I love, and I can sort of talk about them, and then that can lead to, potential opportunities down the time. So every time that I spend an hour, learning German or learning Spanish, it's not me just pursuing a hobby. It's almost like I'm doing it for work now.
Mm. Yeah. That was one thing that I was thinking about, is sort of when anyone gets into this and they've been consistent enough that they get past the 10 episodes and they've been going long enough, like all of us have, or at least reasonably long enough, you start to have to think about, because it's not cheap doing this, like apart from the time, you've got production costs. I think Jase, you said you just hired someone. Did you hire a producer?
No, I've actually got an editor.
You got an editor, like a video editor.
Yeah. So, but I think like he's literally just left school. Like it's worked out unreal. He was doing some sort of like after school holiday stuff with me. And then pretty much like he worked in the week between there was 2 weeks between finishing school and schoolies. And I was like, you've got a full-time job as soon as you get back from schoolies.
Wow.
So, and then he's like, do you want me to not go to schoolies? I'm like, no, you're good. Go to schoolies. But then when you get back, you're working. So
was he a fan of the show? Like was he just like someone you knew?
He listened to the show and he watched a bunch of the stuff, but he wasn't like a person that really engaged with me that much.
Yeah, right.
But it's crazy. He's sort of doing what I did when I started, I guess in a different way, because there wasn't social media when I started, but traveling around trying to go with the big writers and make them content for sponsors and stuff like that. And then I saw a video he posted from a local track that was, it's like in our area. And then I just DM'd him and I was like, hey, do you want a job? and he was like, fuck yes, I want a job.
Yeah, of course.
So,
any smart 10-year-old would say that.
Yeah. So, but hopefully, it'll be like a bit of a learning process for me and him. But yeah, I'd say he'll end up doing sort of producer type stuff. But yeah, really, I just need an editor, like the content, just because we'd go pretty hard with the YouTube thing. So yeah, it's like 2 videos a day on YouTube, and yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, we just hired young Jacob, who's been amazing. I can say when you hire someone who's passionate about what you're doing, like everything is fun to them. Like I said to him the other day, he's like, hey, Matt, because he doesn't know how to edit videos yet, but he's really good. Like he's got a great content brain. And he's already integrated a bunch of stuff like better ads, sort of like mid-roll clips and stuff on our show for the business, clips channel, all these little things that start to add up. Yeah. And then I said to him, hey, we're going to get my personal YouTube channel going again. We're going to do like a video each a week. I want you to spend max 2-3 hours on it. And like, I feel like if you said that to any other person, they'd sort of be like, oh, all right. But he was like, fuck yeah, that sounds fun as. Like 2-3 hours on that and he's getting paid for it. It's sort of like a dream come true. I don't know if that's what he'd say, but there's something nice about that. But it goes to what I was originally thinking is, what's the back end that finances all this? Because we got to all eat. I'm going to guess, Jase, for you, it's videography and clients in that sort of space. It's probably similar for us, but I'm keen to hear what everyone's got going on.
I actually kind of come about it a little bit differently. So to rewind a bit, like I did 10 years in the States and I had like a really big production company kind of deal that I was running over there with. Initially, it was a friend of mine from Australia that I moved over there with. And then I ended up partnering with a guy that we ended up kind of working with. And we were doing like big jobs, like $400,000 projects, like big shit. We had like 5 Reds. We had Phantoms. We were right on the drone thing before the drones would, like before DJI was making drones. We had like $70,000 drones in the air, and it honestly was just like out of control. And but I absolutely loved it. Like we traveled around the world constantly. Red Bull was our biggest client. And then we were doing like music videos and all sorts of stuff, like living in Hollywood. And then I basically like I came home, I got sick, didn't have insurance there, went to go back in, and then they're like, yeah, sorry, you can't come in, null and void my visa. So
really?
had this like big business. So that's why I started the podcast. So
wow.
Anyway, to sort of get to your question, I basically was home with nothing to do. And my producer at Red Bull, who's still to this day one of my best friends, he'd actually been trying to get me to do a podcast for like years and years. And I'd pretty much just said, not interested. Like I was going to be the next Hollywood film director. Like I lived on Sunset Boulevard. Like that's what I was there to do. And then we did this one. It was actually my last project for Red Bull. And Jeremy, the Red Bull producer's like, oh, so by the way, you have to do this podcast with this athlete who we were shooting the project on. And we're just going to use it to take VO of his out of so that it's like natural VO. And I was like, oh, all right. So he sent me to Guitar Center with a credit card, like the Red Bull credit card, and literally bought this mic, like bought all this shit. I spent like $3,000 on this dude's credit card. And I was just like, fuck you, Jeremy. I don't really want to do this. So I just bought everything. And then I did that podcast, and the athlete, his name's Ryan Dungey. He's one of the best supercross riders of all time. And he come up to me afterwards and he was like, dude, like I just retired and that was the best interview. That was the best piece of media I've ever done in my whole career. He's like, please, you should do this. And then I was like, oh, that's like pretty cool. Cause the dude's fucking torture to work with, to be honest. And then, so kind of that, and then having the visa thing, like get ripped away from me. So anyway, I had all the equipment And I was trying to get back to the US to like trying to figure it out. So then I was like, all right, well, I'll do this podcast while I'm at home to sort of get back over there. And then, so I wasn't doing any other work. I wasn't doing any production work. I was like, I'll just kind of go all in on this it was honestly just a project to keep me busy. And then it honestly just like blew up instantly. And then from that, I just pretty much from day one, it was just my full-time job, and it was pretty lean for a while. Like it was kind of tough, like to make it happen. Like I ended up going back and living with my parents as a fucking 30-year-old, but I just sort of saw some potential in it. People really enjoyed it straight away. Like there was a lot of really good feedback.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, honestly, for 3 years, like I just bit the bullet, and it's just been my full-time gig. I built this studio at our warehouse on the Gold Coast. Because that was kind of one of the things I was like, it's really hard to find an industry where you could do the first of something. And to me, like the Tommy and Josh have like a pretty sick space at Daily Talk Show.
Yeah.
But in terms of like someone that built a studio around them for their show, like fully soundproof, all the shit, like I tried to make essentially the Joe Rogan studio of Australia. And honestly, it was just like a bit of a, if I build it, will they come kind of thing. And so far it sort of has. And so I honestly just went all in. This is my full-time job, and it fucking sucked until probably about March this year.
March this year is probably when you started breaking even.
Yeah, just like, I bought AirPods the other day. You know what I mean? Like, I bought, and then the month before that, I bought a pair of fucking Nikes. So that's literally the level that it's been on, you know. And it's not, you can't, I wouldn't say it's like not making money, but there's like, I mean, you boys should definitely come into my studio at some point. Like, I'd love to have yous in, but like, it's just crazy the amount of equipment and the lighting and the mics and the camera. So it was just this constantly, like, it's always made money, but I've just constantly been putting money in.
Yeah.
And now it's sort of just got to the point where I'm like, oh, I don't have to do that much shit now.
Yeah. I'm in a similar position. I think I'm probably in a period just before your March. The only difference is we probably didn't build because Lauren was creative director. We just decided to monetize through an agency model because, you know, she was sick of working for the man, so to speak. And it just made a lot more sense. But I feel like we're nearly there, but I know what you mean. Scraping along for all that time is fucking hard. What about you guys, Juan and Kyrin? You're probably in an earlier stage to the two of us. How many episodes in are you now?
Well, because we've been now creating essentially a piece of content or a podcast per day, it's sort of creeped up quite a bit. I think now at 120 odd episodes, but in total it's around 200 sort of pieces that we've created.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing though. You got to go back to that point. You're talking about the warehouse. We've got to go definitely check that out because I'm getting giddy with excitement just seeing it, and obviously seeing it in person would be really cool. But now back to obviously the question, right? Outside of doing the podcasting, so for me, it's very much it is my side hobby at the moment. I haven't thrown myself in full time, and so for me, I still hold a full-time job in terms of contracting gig. As well as some consulting work that I do as well. So that's still taking the main precedence. And look, I'd also say that as part of the Mere Mortals, I'll say that we've probably been seriously going at it for 7 to 8 months in terms of when we actually made the effort of, okay, this is no longer just having these conversations between me and him. It's let's build it into something that we're actually going to put in effort and we're going to be improving and we're going to have conversations with other people. And we're still trying to stick away from the fortunate enough that we don't have to force the hand of monetization for the podcast. And it's more, let's just focus on improving the content, what we're producing, who we're interacting with, so that if at one stage we want to pull that trigger, it's there and available. So, I mean, but yes, fortunately, or however you want to see it, I'd still do sort of full-time work myself.
Yeah,
right. I think that's probably the move, to be honest.
Yeah.
Do that as long as you can.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because more money, more problems, man. Like I have crazy sponsor commitments that just take a lot of time. So that definitely like to be in that position. I kind of, my hand was forced a little bit in that sense. But I guess it's like it's a trade-off, right? But yeah, it sounds like you guys are doing that the right way.
Yeah. So for me, well, environmentalists be warned. This show is bankrolled by mining money. So I made a bunch of money. Obviously, working in the mines, going straight out of uni just pays incredibly well. So I spent 3 years there, and that, with a combination of me just being pretty frugal in general, has made me get to a point where it's like I can just sort of subsist. Investments that I have sort of pay for my daily living, and anything on top of that is like sort of bonus. So that's actually why I keep this here. It's like a little bit of a reminder of so I've got like a little dozer in front of me, which I was given as a parting gift, which is sort of a reminder of like, I don't want to go back there, but also I'm very appreciative of, the time that I spent, the work that I spent in that industry, because it did, it's gotten me to a stage now where I can, not have to worry about money, where, we're not desperately going for the clickbait titles to get more views to be able to then monetize. It's like, no, we'll do what we want. And, I think in the long run, that'll, work out so much better anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, like Jase, not so much our hand was forced away, but that pressure of, for us, it's always been pressure of overheads. Like, I think when we first started it was really just Lauren and I, and then, we brought on freelancers to help with editing and whatnot. And I think the average cost per week for production would have been like $200, maybe, like barely anything. It was a side hobby where we chucked in the money. But now when I think about monthly overheads, I think like with the staff we've got, it's like 18 grand a month. Wow. And it just adds like more and more commitments that just gets tighter and tighter.
Yep.
And so, you're in this sort of struggle all the time with like, do I make this decision for monetization, or do I make this decision for longevity? And I try as much as I can for longevity, I would say. Which sort of brings me to my thought around guiding principles. What's sort of the guiding idea behind why you guys do what you do? When do you want it to end? Will it end? Like I've now baked this into my personality, and I just think that I'll do it for the rest of my life. Do you guys have a similar view? Yeah,
actually, it was interesting. I was thinking about this and writing about this not too long ago, and there's a whole thing where people say, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, it's not even a marathon either with podcasting in terms of my view when I look at it. It's just this continuous loop sort of race that you're not really competing against other podcasters, because initially, we all kind of get into it thinking, oh, yeah, we're going to be like a Joe Rogan, going to beat this, going to get to this level. But as opposed to that mentality, it's more once you get in, you can go around this loop for as long as you want. And it's a whole mindset of, as long as you're giving it time and you're improving it by listening to obviously people who are listening to your podcast, as well as what you're producing and being able to iterate on it, then it's just a matter of time to be able to then grow that base to where you want it to be.
Yeah, I'm not particularly attached to the idea of the podcast in general. I like freedom. So this has given me the freedom to do exactly what I want. If it got to the stage where we did have all those sponsorship commitments, and say the podcasting platforms only allowed certain types of content on, and you had to follow these strict rules and whatnot, I would probably jump ship to whatever is the next, most open thing, whether that be, something in the virtual reality world, or going solely to YouTube, or whatever it is. So for me, it's like just following the freedom train in essence. And for us, like as far as why our sort of guiding principles, our sort of tagline is striving for excellence through life's lessons, which is, we want to get really good at certain things, maybe not perfectionist, but excellent at some things, and, showcase that to the world as well, and to myself, because one of the best things about doing the podcast so far has been examining myself and going like, oh man, you're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong as well. And just continually doing that.
What about you, Jase?
I think that the thing that I realized really early on that became the thing that made it feel important for me to do this was like, I realized that I'm very lucky to know the people that I know. So through the whole motocross thing, and then like I got to the top of that sport, and the people that I dealt with daily were like the top of this industry. Then as a result of that, you meet like the big Red Bull producers, and then I'd meet big musicians, and then I'd meet big podcast guys, and I'd meet all of these people that had kind of risen to the top of their chosen endeavor. And I definitely took that for granted in my 20s when I was living there. And then when I started the podcast and I just was having like this general conversation with these people, the feedback that I was getting from the people listening was just like, this changed my life. Like, I was depressed. I thought about this way. You guys opened my mind, and blah, blah, blah. And to me, I'm just like, fuck, we barely said anything. Like this was just a like general discourse between me and this person. This is how we always talk. Yeah. But I started equating that with, especially like my audience, I'd say is like the real blue collar Aussie dude that buys a bike and goes to the fucking drags, and you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of dudes in that category that are really talking about their feelings, really voicing their struggles. Their mates probably aren't doing that same thing for them. So I think I just realized that I had a very, very unique access to a group of people that have reached, kind of like what the boy said, you know, like they've sort of learned through life's lessons. They've achieved this like level of excellence at what they do. And you take away the bike, or you take away the car, or you take away any of the shit that they've done. They're just people that have kind of like learned these lessons. And for me, I sort of started to see it as almost like this would be a waste of a resource that I have access to. Like I actually can do good by just having a conversation, illuminating some shit that these people that listen may not know, and it can really change people's lives. And I mean, this week was crazy seeing like people's Spotify numbers, you know, like there's people that have listened to like 9,000 hours of Gypsy Tales this year. And it's like, fuck, man.
That sort of shit blows my mind when you see the numbers, and it's really hard to imagine that amount of people or hours listened to of you. Like I just find that really, I don't think I'll ever get over that.
And the weird thing with podcasting too, this is what I've found. And so like just our YouTube channel this month is 80,000 hours watched.
Yeah, right.
Just the YouTube. And I think it's one of the really great things about podcasting is that, so like we used to do a lot of like music stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we would go with these big bands and we'd film these concerts, and there's 50, 60,000 people there. And those dudes on stage are like getting all of that energy, and that shit affects those guys. It can't not, like you can't, it's so hard to be like a superstar and have it not change the lens in which you see reality, you see yourself. But doing a podcast, like, fuck, man, I walk down the street and like I might get recognized a few times a week. And it's just like people, it's a very different relationship. They sort of see you as like just a normal person, not like they're not screaming at you from a stage. And I think that gives podcasters a real, I don't know, like a unique way to stay in touch with reality, because you're just not getting the perspective of just how many people are like watching you talk. Like essentially every episode you've got fucking a packed AFL grand final listening to you, but it's just you and a person in a room. There's no influence in the same way that if we were doing that podcast and 80,000 people were listening, you'd fucking have 80,000 eyes on you and 80, you know what I mean? So it's a unique medium in that sense, I think. And I think that lets it stay really grounded, and it doesn't seem to change people in the same way that other kind of forms of media do, I guess.
Yeah, it's like there's almost a Chinese wall between you and fame. Like I've noticed that with Rogan recently, where even though he's signed with Spotify and, you know, he's got all this stuff going on, if he puts out a tweet, if he puts out a post or something like that, it is like he is the guy now when it comes to interview shows. Like, he rates higher than all of the nightly shows in the US combined, I think, or at least hits them by like 100% or 150% of an average show's views. But you can sort of see when he's sitting there in that studio and there's only like two of them that it's still not really hit him yet in some way. Maybe it has, but maybe less so than, say, someone who's a star in Hollywood or a musician on stage, at least I find. It's very, very interesting. I don't think I'll ever get over it when our producer tells us like what's the unique listeners per week when we have our Friday wrap-ups. I almost don't believe him. Like, I almost feel like he's lying.
Well, it's just a number on the screen, and like you get a million or 10 million, you're just adding a fucking zero on a screen. That's probably, if you counted the pixels, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite important.
Yeah. I think the funny thing is talking to you, I don't know if you guys have ever found this, but like for years when we started this, like my parents and my fiance's parents would always say like, why are you doing this? Like, what is this shit? And now you've like, you know, you've had a few guests that they recognize, so it's sort of hitting home for them. But like, I think it was recently when I told one of my parents around the numbers, and it was like the equivalent of, you know, filling out like the forum or something like that in Melbourne. And they start to see it. But you know, I still will never, ever see that at all because it's just a number on a screen for me. Speaking of producers, my producer had a question for all you guys, something that is mulling on, or we're mulling on at the moment when it comes to promotion.
Yep. And
we've gone through this stage at the moment where, so you guys have been podcasting for like 6-7 months. I think, Jase, you've been doing it for a couple of years now. We went through the stage of everything being like audiograms to like, you've got to have video now, to everyone has to have a YouTube channel. And now it's sort of all about Spotify. Where do you guys see the future of promotion? How are you getting that cut through to acquiring more listeners, users, people that are interested in what you're doing?
Yeah, honestly, for us, I think actually doing it outdoors, to be honest, is where we'll see like the biggest gains, because so one of the things we do is on a Saturday, we'll just grab the 2 USB mics, a laptop, head down to Kangaroo Point and just chill by the river. And you can get, you know, thousands of people over the course of an hour sitting there, come by and check it out. And one of the things we've been meaning to do for a while is actually just get like a big sort of poster, chuck it up and say something like, you know, Mere Mortals live recording or whatnot. And, you know, for us, because we're still so small, I think I personally want to concentrate more on the Brisbane area, and because that's one of the things I'm doing as well. Like I don't really have that much of an interest in interviewing the real high profile people. I'd rather just find people doing like really intriguing or random stuff just in everyday life in Brisbane and interviewing them. So like I talked with a guy the other day who does ultra marathons, but he weighs like 110 kilos. He's a big guy. And so that's I find that really interesting. So like, you know, why the hell are you doing that, man? That must be so hard compared to, you know, 50 kilo people running around. So for me personally, I think, more branding awareness in our local area, and the digital side will sort of, I have no idea where that'll go. So I'll focus on what I know I can control, which is getting out there, actually meeting people, talking to people, and having people physically see what's going on.
What about you, Jase?
Oh man, I don't know. I think about it a lot. Like, I definitely think in terms of, if you want to, I guess, talk in terms of like what works. I mean, for me, like the YouTube thing, basically, if you look at my YouTube channel, it's fucking moto clickbait, essentially. Like, that's the shit that works on YouTube. And I kind of had in my head, I was like, no, this is what I want it to be. Like, we're meaningful and we have these great conversations, and you can take so much from each podcast. And it's not just the moto, but, you know, like you can kind of be on your high horse of like, fucking listen to everything. It's so good. But then it's like, I think the biggest thing that I've realized, especially lately, is like, give the fucking people what they want. Like any great artist will tell you that once you make your art, it's not yours anymore. So it's like, I do the thing, and then these people over here on this channel, they like the fucking clickbait moto shit. Give them the clickbait moto shit. And then if they want to come and listen to the podcast on iTunes or Spotify and listen to the other amazing people that don't ride a motocross bike, then they can. And so it's not up to me to like try and dictate what people should like. And I think that as soon as I let go of that, it sort of worked a little bit better for me. Like I see like iTunes is iTunes. It's like a weird deal. Like that's the biggest channel for me by like so far. And there's so many people that listen to it that will never contact me, they'll never send you a DM. They'll never leave a review. Like they're a ghost to me, you know? And then Instagram is just, it's quite personal. Like I'll reply to everybody. I try and have genuine conversations, give people advice. That sort of gives me like a bit of that's like the rudder of like, get what the boys were saying earlier, you know, you like listen to people, you get their feedback or whatever. And then YouTube is like, I just try and get as many views as possible because it makes me money. And then I just kind of don't give a fuck. At that point, it's just like that's their thing. Like they're like, oh, you fucking clickbaited me into this. And I'm like, well, you clicked it and now you're commenting and you'll either liked or dislike. So thank you regardless. But yeah, it's the
YouTube
honestly,
comments
man,
hilarious.
Yeah, it's just a weird one. And I think that already, like if you told me 3 years ago where I'd be, it's already so much bigger than I ever thought it'd be. So like from here on out, I don't think I'm as worried with growth as what I was. And even so last month we had our biggest month across every platform. And it's almost just like, fuck, now like you just set this bar and it becomes a weird thing if you focus on it. And you hear people more and more as I guess the numbers do get bigger, they stop looking at it. And I think that at a certain point I can see the thinking behind that, because at the start you're like wanting to grow because you want it to be sustainable. But now it's like, okay, it's sustainable. And if I'm obsessing over the numbers, like that's just all out of fucking ego.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I stopped looking at the numbers like 2 years ago. I just have someone else tell me as like an update on a weekly basis when we do our review. And I'm more interested in what you mentioned before about like the YouTube comments. I fucking love that. Like my favorite thing is some random person I've never spoken to before. I think when you guys hit me up individually, like I just thrive off that shit. It's like a brain wank. I don't know how else to phrase it, but it's just like the best because it's like a real person. And like you said, it does give you like guidance as to what's good. I found that like with our producer, Jacob, he just gives me like a third party opinion on what I sense is going on. And sometimes it just gives me an excuse to make a break on that decision. Because sometimes I can be sort of paralyzed and indecision on little things that don't matter. So yeah, I feel like having that outside has been really, really helpful. I've always wondered, like, we're in still like the really, really, really early days. Like, I do wonder if we sit here having this conversation and 10 years from now, our form of media is like the Parkinson or Days of Our Lives type shows in 10 years from now. Did you guys ever have like a show like that you watched growing up?
I mean, Simpsons for me would definitely be, that's etched into my memory.
I'm thinking more about like an interview show. Was there ever like because Parkinson was huge in my family. It was on the ABC a lot, but also Days of Our Lives. Not Days of Our Lives. This Is Your Life with what's his name? The guy from Channel 9.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say that's the only one that really came to my mind. That was a bit of an older one. That this is your life and going through the story of it of their past.
And he gave him the book, right? He'd give him like the book at the end. I remember he had like he had Ali on. That was like huge. Okay, I think it was Ray Martin. Pretty sure.
Yeah. What I often think about, right, is the potential as well of some of the conversations you're having today to, in 10 or even maybe 15 years, kind of looking back and, whether you uncovered having a discussion with someone that was quite young who then went on to do something quite successful, or you yourself go back. It's kind of like looking back at the original Joe Rogan podcast episodes, right? When you look back at where he started from, where he is today, it's just like, wow, that's a huge change. And we noticed, at least going back to our very first episode to now, look back and go, dang, I can see even the improvement that I'm having myself in the way that I vocalize things and the way that we, promoting it, the way that we're actually cutting the video and everything.
Yeah.
I think in 10 years time, we'll probably look back at some of these conversations, and that, I don't think all of them will be timeless, but there's going to be a few there that you'll pick up, and it'll be like watching an old YouTube video and you go, oh yeah, this still holds some value.
Yeah. I remember listening. I thoroughly encourage everyone not to go do it unless you want to be in excruciating pain, but listening to the first couple episodes of my show is horrendous. Like, it's just so bad. Like, I don't know, Jase, if you sometimes you see some people like start a podcast, or initially when they start an interview based podcast, and they've got like a piece of paper like this and they ask a question and they go, okay, cool, and they go on to the next one. Yeah. I feel like I may have had a little bit of that in the start. Like, I was in that struggle of like, I have to hit all these things as opposed to just sort of like doing the notes and letting my brain go with the flow during the interviews. But that's sort of part of the process, right? You're finding out what you're good at.
Yeah, I think for me personally, like, I was definitely lucky because I did interviews with people constantly. Like, I was just a filmmaker, and it sort of has been a part of, I guess, just a part of like my professional career, my entire adult life. I'd say for me, the biggest thing is just working on myself, and to, like we said at the very start, like just removing this self from it and having like the compulsion to talk about yourself, or to, you know what I mean? Like, interject yourself into this conversation for reasons that are very disingenuous. Like, it's not that would, I'd say, would be like my biggest struggle. And I think from the audio video side, I'm lucky that was my career. It was funny, actually. I just got, I had a guy on the podcast the other day, and then he's like, oh yeah, I saw there's a whole thread on like this message board about my YouTube channel. And then I went on this message board and I was looking at it, and then I found some stuff from like 2 years ago, and all the comments are like, this guy fucking doesn't stop interrupting. This guy talks about himself. This guy's a fucking idiot. Like, and I don't really get that now.
Yeah.
So, I think that the process is it's the best thing that the podcast has ever done for me, is have, like, I used to say before I started the podcast to my friends, I was like, look, if enough people call you a fuckwit, you're a fuckwit. That's just that's just the end of the day. Like, there can be somebody that says that you're a wanker, but if it's like one or two people, it's like, all right, everybody's had like some bad dealings. But if enough people think you're a fuckwit, like, you probably are. Like, there's a really good reason. Like, we're very social creatures. And so, like, if you're getting a lot of those comments, they're probably right. And it forced me to really look at that. And I'd say that that's probably been the biggest thing, is just like figuring out, like, what is this need to interject yourself? What is your idea of yourself? Like, where does all of this come from? And I think that, that's probably been, I've never typed questions. I never really do research. That's for a positive and a negative at times. But in terms of like the structure, like, I've never changed from day one. I'd say the only thing that I have done is just try and work on myself, so that the person that's sitting across from the interview subject is just a better person to talk to.
You. Yes, you. Are you intrigued by this episode? If so, go to our footer on the website, neuralle.com, neuralle.com. We're going to give you an insight. Each week it's going to be on business, marketing, or a topic that we covered in the episode. At all, we would love your support, and it would help us in developing the intellect around this series. But without going on too much longer, let's get back into this episode. I want to ask you guys about personal insights, but I know, Juan, you got to run, don't you?
Probably in a few minutes.
Okay, cool.
A few minutes.
What's what's been the biggest insight for you guys personally doing this?
Oh, look, I'll give you a couple of straight up. When I listened back to a couple of my very first ones, it's the amount of times that I would use filler words like and likes, and the ability for me to just go down this rabbit hole path of things that wasn't even
still there, brother.
and it's interesting because in conversation, it's great to have, but it's the power of how well I'm actually trying to articulate something that might be best said in a minute that I'm kind of spilling into 10 and 15 minutes. And the reason that's important for me is, my day-to-day work, I've managed up to 100 people and managed teams and a lot of people across it. And when I'm trying to get messages across, especially when it's executive boards or CEOs or other people, I'm just not talking shit for 10 minutes when I can sort of convey whatever I'm trying to talk about or a story in a minute, get that across, get the point through and move on. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing that I've taken away, is looking back and understanding, all right, if I'm talking about a topic and someone's listening to this, how can I convey it in the simplest way that's understood without me having to go into meaningless conversations around it?
Yeah, for me, I think it's around, I guess, knowing that I do actually have a voice and that what I do say can affect people and does matter in some sort of, even though a very small way. So when I was growing up, I just had a lot of issues with regards to like how I saw myself, whether that be in group settings. As I already mentioned, I'm relatively introverted. So those big sort of venues and stuff, I wouldn't get on well with groups, and body issues, like you name it, I had it. And so from 2014 through to 2019, I had no social media. There was no Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I had WhatsApp, but I'd only talk with one and maybe one other friend. And doing this, I guess, has realized, like, was I actually scared of putting myself out there? A little bit. And it was because I was unconfident in myself. And so, doing this for a while now, I realize, okay, yeah, sometimes I do talk absolute bullshit and you probably shouldn't listen to what I say because it's bad advice. But I think for, 80% of the time at least, it's, thoughtful, considerate things that I have worked on. And so, it's almost like just giving me a bit of confidence doing this and realizing, like, what, I do actually have some value to add to the world, and I don't need to like hide in my shell, I guess.
Yeah. So it's almost helped you personally with that introversion. Because I know my partner's got the same thing, is that, because she's almost been forced into this world. She's forced to socialize more than she normally would. It has made her better in that regard as well, which is, I think it's a good thing. It has to be a good thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing with introverts. It's not that you like particularly hate socializing. It just drains you. So if you do it too much, it's you're burnt out.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a guest who, and it's amazing how many people have that as well. Like introverts who also then have social anxiety. Like I had a guest last week, Effie Katz, and she's huge. Like in the fashion world, it's a very extroverted world. And like I just asked her, like, what's the thing that you wish that you could talk about more? And she was like, oh, I've got social anxiety. I was like, what? Okay. This is not what I expected. So I feel like that's been a nice thing as well by doing this, is learning more about people that you wouldn't have expected, but also about yourself and how you react to that. Like I think going back to what you said, Jase, I still have it and I still get comments about it, but my problem is, like, I don't want to interject myself. I just want to offer a bit of vulnerability in the process to make that guest feel like they can talk normally. Because some people are on, they're on that PR trap with, like, they've got to talk a certain way, and I'm talking about shit in my pants or something like that, and I'm trying to get them to sort of open up a bit.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, that's one of the, I'd say probably the most.
He's just
deal. Yeah, I mean that's definitely something whenever I do get these negative comments and shit. One of the things I've kind of always say to people is like, righto, I do my show for 3 hours, right? Now, if I went to a barbecue and spoke about myself for 3 hours uninterrupted, people would think I was the biggest fucking idiot on planet Earth. That's like a natural feeling that I think we would all feel, right? Like you go talk about yourself for 3 hours straight, and then like that is a normal thing to feel like that's not great. So you can't expect to get a guest on to a show for 3 hours and just ask them like bang, 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 bang. You need to have this back and forward to make that person feel like they're not being interrogated. And then to your point, man, I always try and go like whatever I want to get out of a person in terms of, let's say it's social anxiety, I'll go way further down the road of my own insecurities and my own anxieties and my own feelings, because then that it almost like brings that person with you. You know what I mean? It's like you create this turbulence and then they're dragged into it with you. And I think that people from the outside looking in, it's so easy. They're sitting there and they're just this passive consumer of this product that you're making, but you're the engine, like you're the thing that has to create that turbulence that drags the guest along with you. And the more turbulence that you could create, and don't associate that with as a negative word, but it's like an energy that you're creating, and then that drags people in, it sucks people towards that. So like if you're not prepared, like you're only going to get what you give in that sense. And I think that it's just super, super important to show those aspects of yourself and to give people that license to be vulnerable, because it's like a safe place to do it.
Yeah. And it sort of goes back to what you're saying before, with your audience anyway, in having that environment where they can listen to other guys talk about it, which is very interesting. Is there, for you guys personally, have you ever had a particular message that stands out to you at all, like over Instagram or anything like that?
I've had one where, we started interacting with, it was sort of like a fellow podcaster, also Brisbane-based, who's, definitely like, I think up there in terms of numbers with regards to you guys. And she reached out to us and we sort of had a bit of back and forth, and we're talking about, just on one of our episodes, about, I guess, like being honest and open, the truth, I think. And we're just saying, like, we're just talking about it in sort of like a abstract philosophical way. But she came back to us saying, you know what, like I've sort of been like a little bit deceptive with you guys. She had much, I guess, like the same issues that I did, which was, not wanting to put her face out there, not wanting to put her sort of, expose herself to the world in essence. And she was like, look, this isn't actually my real name. My real name is this. And I just wanted to let you guys know that, because I felt like I was being a bit deceitful. So that one actually hit me pretty hard, which was like, oh, wow, we're at least talking about concepts that would make someone, voluntarily reach out to us like that and expose themselves, because that was a risk on her part to do that. And so, that was a pretty big message when we received that.
Wow. What about you, Jase? Cool.
I mean, I get stuff that sort of I feel like is way above my pay grade. You know what I mean? There was one in particular. This chick actually went to rehab for like a heroin addiction, and I guess like she grew up in like a racing family, so she kind of knew some of the names that were on the show. And anyway, she did this like 3-month stint in rehab and listened to the podcast every day.
Wow.
And like said it got her off drugs and she wanted to kill herself and the whole, so there's definitely been a bunch of heavy stuff. There was one dude as well. I talk a lot about like meditation and shit like that, and which is pretty much as like left wing to my kind of audience is what it gets. But I sort of kind of really push that message just for like the the impacts that it's had on my own life, and it's been sort of through the podcast that it was even something that developed on my end. And there was a guy actually that he's a prison guard at one of the prisons in Australia, like maximum security prisons, and he actually said that he started doing like a meditation mindfulness practice, and it changed the way that he treated prisoners in the prison. And it's just said that like just that has fully changed his life and the life of these other prisoners and stuff. So yeah, you definitely get some like crazy shit come through. And recently too, we've started doing some racing, like motocross racing. Yeah, me and my friend Sam, he's kind of like, I guess he's like my Joey Diaz, you know. But yeah, so we've started doing these races, and he's like a pretty big dude, you know, like he's overweight, and he gets out, and we do these races we have no business doing. Like up there, like brutal fucking 6-hour motocross races, like with all these dudes that are like the best riders in Australia. And recently we've been having a lot of people that are like, you know what, fuck it, I'm overweight, I'm out of shape, I haven't raced forever, I thought I'd never race again, but I just want to go hang out with my mates. And so like I think being able to influence the culture in our, you know, sort of microcosm, that's been kind of rewarding as well, you know, just like, because it's not just the fact like, oh yeah, more people are racing motocross, it's just what it gives you in terms of, I guess, the, you know, feeds your soul kind of deal.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always consistently been like someone coming to me and saying like they were very surprised by a certain interview about what they learned about that person. I don't think I've ever really had a message about me personally like impacting someone like that. I just don't think we've had that. But what was interesting is having previously had a prior guest. Actually, I'd phrase it as we've had some people, because of what we were doing, I think, try and use us. I don't know how else to phrase it, but people who I feel like the veil was lifted a little in terms of how some people in the public sphere carry themselves in private, which is probably one of the most illuminating things for me. There's one in particular that will always stay in my head where the guy just basically wanted to use us to make his show, and we were expected to do everything for free. And I thought that was really interesting. So that's probably been like the biggest thing for me. But otherwise, it's just people talking. It's always someone talking about a specific individual that they just would not have expected the conversation to come from. Other than Rogan, who do you look up to in this space?
I like it's hard because there's so many different podcasts I listen to, but I wouldn't particularly want to do it like them or be like them. But I would just say, but you know, that being said, that it does influence me a lot, and you know, you take ideas from how they do their things. So there's one podcast called the Lex Fridman podcast. He talks a lot about artificial intelligence. I like his style and the way he gets into topics with guests, and you can tell, he's not entirely comfortable, I would say, doing the podcast a lot of times, which makes it just so much more interesting.
Yeah, he looks down on himself quite a bit, actually.
Yeah,
which I find really interesting. He actually talks down on himself quite a lot when he goes on other people's podcasts, but he's fucking funny on LinkedIn. Like, he's like a shit poster on LinkedIn. He's very, very funny. What about you, Jase?
Yeah, I actually don't listen to any podcasts at all.
Yes. I'll watch stuff on YouTube mainly.
Yeah, Lex Fridman is my dude though. That's my guy. So I'll watch. Honestly, it's just a time thing. Like, I don't have to commute anymore. I live like a minute from my warehouse. So my commute time, and then my jiu-jitsu gym, I literally have like a 12-kilometer radius that I stay in unless I ride motocross. And then I'm with my friends and we're talking shit. So yeah, and now like no flying and shit either.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm pretty much like this. So this year I just completely cut out TV and everything from my life. So I don't have a TV. Anytime that I would want to watch TV. Instead, I've been reading this year. But I do listen to the meditation app that I use is Sam Harris's Waking Up. And he has a bunch of their conversations within that app. And there's a lot of Q&A stuff that he does. And I'll listen to a lot of lectures from guys like Alan Watts. And I think that one of the podcasts that the Mere Mortal Boys did, they were talking about like your spiritual beliefs, and you said you don't identify as a Buddhist, but that would be like your closest thing that you would identify with. But I know I sit in that same thing. Like I listen to a lot of Buddhism style lectures, and I read a lot of Buddhist writings, and just to try and, I guess, extract what I can out of that makes sense to me. But yeah, that's been for the last 2 years. Like that's been sort of my primary focus.
That's really interesting because
I just make the show how I want to make the show. Yeah. And then that's it, you know?
It's interesting you mentioned that because I've pretty much read this book in about 2 days, which I read for an hour every night to sort of chill out. But it's called The Almanac of Nabal Ravikant. He's been on Rogan's podcast and a few others before, but I found him actually through Tim Ferriss, and he's like a walking wise old man. And
he's amazing.
I'm literally up to the section now where it's the chapter about happiness, and he talks about how he literally said that if he had to claim a religion, it would be Buddhism, but he doesn't want to title it because he reads a lot of the Buddhist teachings and Krishnamurti, and the thing that he phrased it as is just like inner peace. That's the biggest thing. And I've probably gone through that recently as well, reading this book, is I've on all of my related apps, social media, etc. I've really culled down what I'm looking at. Like politics, I've really culled down anything to do with politics. I can't. And it was really, really gratifying for me recently when Jacob, our producer, came to me and said, like, hey, I don't think this fits well into our show anymore. Like, I think like business, marketing, and sort of performance is where you want to go. And that to me was so relieving because I just had this idea that I had to interview politicians and whatnot. And to be honest, they were the fucking worst episodes.
Well, I think the thing with, if I could just to elaborate on the whole, like why I don't like to identify with anything. Like I think basically that all of, like you look at Zen and Buddhism and Hindi, like any of those ancient traditions and religions, they all arrive at the same place as a guy like Sam Harris or any of the new school, like Western non-dualist kind of teachings. They all get to this place like, all right, there's no self, there's nothing here, it's emptiness. But then the problem is that all the religious aspect comes in is like they get to that point and then they start explaining what it means. And then it's like, okay, so you've just got to this point where there's no self, there's emptiness, there's inner peace, whatever. And now you're trying to explain it. So you've just stepped away from the self and then you're just using the self to explain the no self. So it just gets stuck in like this loop. And I think that the move is, and I mean, I've always had this ever since I was a kid, this shit, it's been like really heavily on my mind, but I've always had this analogy of like, we're just a rat in a shoebox and there's nothing in the shoebox. It's just this rat and a box. And then, yeah, you might have an idea that there's a world outside of this box, but you have no fucking data. There's nothing that you could do that would give you any information what's outside of the box. All you're trying to do is explain what's outside of the box with absolutely no fucking information. So as soon as any metaphysical claims, like, fuck man, I love seeing dudes on YouTube that want to say that like, oh, there's consciousness produces all reality. And it's like, well, fuck, you just get to this thing where you said there's no self and we're only consciousness. And now you're stepping back in to try and explain what you've already said fucking isn't there. So it's just, to me, that's why I want to use those, but all of the teachings in terms of, Buddhism and all of these kinds of religions, they get you to that point of no self. I just think that it's a problem then when you to try and explain what's happening there requires the self that you've just worked on losing.
When did you realize that? Was that Harris that said that?
What's that?
The idea around getting to this moment in time of no self whatsoever, and then going back to things like organized religion that then try and parade around this idea of self.
Honestly, it's just visible.
Right.
Like it's visible to you, like to yourself, essentially, you know, like when you step back into, it's like, have you ever done like MDMA or something, or like mushrooms, and then you've gone, holy fuck, I am a feeling. Like I've stopped being me. I'm this feeling. You have that experience, or like the mushrooms, and like I'm everything. And then it goes away as soon as you explain it to people, or as soon as you try and explain it to yourself. As soon as that self-talk comes in, like you qualifying the experience that you're having, then the experience itself disappears, and then you're just back in self-land. So, I mean, it definitely is like a big part of what guys like Sam Harris teach. But yeah, I think that's sort of the point, and that's why you sit, and that's why you do the meditation every single day. That's why you challenge yourself to go there. You're just seeing that for yourself. And I think after years of doing it, then you just stop having to qualify it, because in like the early stages for me, I was like, that's it. I was there. Everybody, oh wait, it's just me. And now I'm back talking to myself. And then where I was, I'm not there anymore.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the constant battle. I think that's what Nabal was talking about in the book, is you got to not focus on being in peace versus out of peace. You've just got to look at it at like every single moment, like literally a minute at a time, which is really fucking hard. Like it's almost impossible. Even the idea of like wanting to be happiness, like you talk about Buddhism, that's called seeking. And so
even to when you say like you want to be happy, well, don't even say that. Like there's nothing to be had. Like if you really believe in this, and you've spent the time looking, then like the feeling of heartbreak, or a really good one. This is one that Sam Harris talks about, the feeling of excitement and anxiety in terms of the objective way they present in your conscious experience, in terms of just a feeling tone. They're the same thing. When you're anxious, you got the same tightness in your chest, the heart rate elevates, blah, 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 blah. But you associate it with like, oh, fuck, I'm anxious, I'm nervous about this thing. Or you could be just about to go out for a sporting event, or you've just landed a trick that you've never done before. You get that same feeling that anxiety presents, but it's in this completely different context in your mind, and you associate it as excitement. So the problem is like just labeling experience and trying to like compartmentalize what your experience is. Oh, this is anxiety, this is happiness, this is sadness. They're all just these things that are appearing into your space of awareness, the things that you can potentially be aware of as you.
Speaking of seeking then, what are you guys excited about for next year when you think about the year that's been with COVID and everything? Speaking of the Gold Coast, I think we're actually planning a trip up there in mid-Jan or something like that. We were meant to go to a wedding, and now we've got this like $1,800 credit with who is it? Jetstar, because we're going to classic, like someone's having a Bali wedding, and so now we're planning Gold Coast, drive down to Byron, because we haven't seen that part of the world in probably 5 or 6 years. And I'm excited because I'm getting married next year. I'm excited because, I don't know, I feel like maybe we will be able to travel normally again and see people again. What are you guys thinking about when it comes to next year?
So Juan and I do we're big on goal setting. So every year around October, I set myself like sort of 8 goals that line up with like my favorite, or the things that I've decided are important to me in life, which are, tend to revolve around the same things that everyone else does, family, relationships, health, spirituality, things like that. So I have like a bunch of mini ones that I'm really excited to do. So those involve, I'm planning on just renting a little studio somewhere up in the mountains and just doing like my own little silent retreat, just going up there for seven nights and just doing that. I'm starting to learn German, so it's always fun, like picking up a new language, and you almost, for me at least, you can create like a new persona. You were mentioning before, Jordan, about why I had Michael on LinkedIn. It's because I was actually using it for a bit of Spanish as well, and Michael is sort of my Spanish persona. So when I speak in Spanish to different people, I ask them to call me Michael, just because, well, the name's a lot easier to pronounce in Spanish than Kyrin. But yeah, me personally, I wouldn't say it's like one thing, just a bunch of mini goals that I set for myself each year, and ticking them off one by one, it just brings me so much enjoyment.
What about you, Jase?
Man, I honestly don't even know how to answer it. I'm just kind of cruising along.
Cruising. Do you have any intention to get, now that like as an example, the borders down with New South Wales, Victoria? I don't know if you're much of an international traveler or have been in the last couple of years, but do you want to do anything like that?
Yeah, we've definitely got we've been doing a lot of vlog sort of style stuff where we go on these trips, my buddy Sam and I. So we've got a bunch of stuff planned for work. I think we're looking at doing like a Tassie trip in January, and then a West Oz trip where we go and do these like kind of races and stuff. And then we got like a good crew of dudes in New Zealand. So like it would be cool to do some of that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to do a challenge where I'm going to do a year's worth of jiu-jitsu in 1 month. So I'm trying to, like, because of the whole COVID thing, it's just, I actually fucked myself up all year. So I crashed a Harley in Vietnam in February, and I ripped my shoulder out. So I had three months off with that. And then I crashed a dirt bike in July and I broke my hip, and I'm still having problems with that. So I've pretty much missed this whole year of jiu-jitsu. And then like a bunch of people did with gyms being closed and stuff. So I wanted to do this challenge where I did 52 classes in a month. And then brought a couple of cool people on the podcast, whether it was like training partners or physios, and, just try and have like a month where the content of the podcast revolved around health and wellness.
Do you intend like at all to have a day off during that month?
I don't think I can actually. I think I think I can do Sundays off. It's 13 sessions a week. So it'd be essentially 2 sessions a day and 1 on Sunday. So Sunday would be a day off, I guess.
Yeah.
Unless I wanted to fit 3 into the week. But I kind of just want to use it as a chance to try and inspire the community. There's one thing actually I would like to mention before we wrap it up about the podcast in general, is that I actually didn't put enough emphasis on the community aspect of the podcast at an early stage. And I think now probably more important than the numbers that we do on the show. And it's easy to say, obviously, when there's numbers there, you can kind of go, oh, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's about this. But I think that more so now, I think it's about the community. Like they've literally, the whole Gypsy Gang thing, like there's a whole community of people, like they go ride together, they meet up, and, that to me is a super important part of the podcast now, probably the most important part of it. So to have that community, and again, Tommy and Josh from Daily Talk Show, that they were the ones that really inspired that from me with the whole Gronk Squad thing. And they said, that the community is the most important part. And I learned that through COVID. But yeah, so I want to do that month as a challenge to kind of ignite a fire in the Gypsy Gang. Like, all right, I don't give a fuck what you guys do, but for 1 month, you've got to do something 52 times, whether that's meditation, whether that's push-ups, whether that's fucking, I don't care, but let's all do something together. And then we'll make this whole month around just human performance, health and wellness, giving time to yourself to try and like be better.
What month are you thinking?
Man, honestly,
Do it in February.
Yeah. Why, you got something going on in Feb?
No, it's just 28 days, so it makes it even harder.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do it in January either, because then I'll be roped into doing something if I'm up on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, you're roped into doing the show. I definitely need you to sit there at some point. Yeah, I just got to let my body heal. Like I'm still struggling so bad with my hip, so it's been a real. This has been the toughest injury I've ever had.
Yeah. I think, honest to God, I'm just excited to see humans in the flesh. I mean, look, you guys, I'm going to say,
you've had it so much worse than us, man. Like honestly, my year, like I've had the best year of my life, and I don't want to say that to rub anything in, but really, the challenges that COVID presented, I think, made me better. And yeah, so I'm not bummed on this year at all. But I live in Queensland, and you guys got fucked.
Victoria has been. Do you know? It's actually been. It's been a good thing and a bad thing. Like it's a bad thing because things didn't happen that we wanted to happen, but I feel as well it sort of just changed things up a bit. Like sometimes you just need a little bit of chaos to have a situation where people see the value in certain things in their life, as well as the fact that, there's just a lot of, like even in my industry, there's just a lot of businesses that exist that shouldn't, because they're just running on empty. They're just zombie businesses. So that's been quite illuminating. And really, if you look at this year and if someone says to you, oh, I didn't get this thing done or I wasn't able to do that personal goal or whatever, you don't really have an excuse. Like you're never going to get it done because this was the year. Like I went deep this year. You guys are going to laugh on bonsai shit. Like I am so deep on bonsai right now.
That's dope.
Like it's just ridiculous. I started with one plant that my mum gave me in December, and now I've got like 10 or 12. I don't have any more room on my balcony. It's just not going to happen. And I think my partner will crack the shits if I spend any more money. It's sort of like one of those hobbies where it's like cars or bikes or music or whatever. You don't realize how expensive it is until you get into it.
Yep. Podcasting.
Podcasting, dude. When you were talking before about all the equipment, I was thinking the same thing. This year I had major GAS, they call it, gear acquisition syndrome. I just bought and bought and bought shit.
Mate, that's my life, unfortunately.
Particularly when those grants came in, we had some specific grants here in Victoria because we're all fucked. And the first thing I did with the money was go and buy new cameras, which as it turned out, a few weeks later we were locked down again and we never used them until mid-November. So it was like we bought them and we didn't use it for, apart from these at-home Zoom interviews, we never used the new cameras, which was fucking hilarious. So that was.
I just dropped $4,000 on a hard drive.
Jesus Christ.
Fucking, I'm over it, eh?
Yeah.
Just with it's like a multi-user one, but yeah, like it's just when you think that you're like, I got everything, you just.
It's the next thing. It's like my producer said to me the other day, he's like, oh man, like, do you have to have paper in the interviews? Like, because you rustle it a lot and it fucks with the sound. And I'm like, not really. He's like, yeah, you should just get an iPad. And I'm like, fuck, it's just another thing.
Just say, who does number 2 work for, mate?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but he is right because when we do the in-person interviews, we started using like lav mics and they're omnidirectional.
Oh, yeah.
They're not, just straight in like this thing. So you do a little bit of this.
What was your reasoning with that? I did notice when you did that. I pretty much see everything you guys post. So I've watched your progression for a long time now.
Yeah, it's something I'm battling with at the moment. I think someone I looked up to at the time gave me this idea of changing the format of the studio because of the style of the interview and making it much more like Parkinson, which is the show I grew up on and loved. Yep. And they have those lav mics, and you guys can probably see just in the top there, we've got the boom mics as well. But I think we just don't have the right studio yet, and when we move, those sound issues will fix. But there's no doubt that speaking into this, is better than speaking into an omnidirectional lav mic, even if they are $2,000 a pack. You know what I mean? Those things aren't cheap. So yeah, it was more a visual thing than everything, but I don't think we're really set on anything, and it'll change over time. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But this next year is all about growth for me. I can't wait to get into a proper studio.
Have
This is in my home
to get into a proper studio.
Yeah, like, dude, that's one thing about Melbourne. So again, going back to my point about it being good in a way. So yes, rents haven't changed, but you get things like abatements and all these incentives, like with rental agreements now. I saw one the other day on St Kilda Road in Melbourne, get like 150 square meters, and the deal works out that although on paper you're paying I don't know what it is, like $4,000 a month or something in rent for 150 square, which is a lot lower than what it has been. It actually, with all the incentives, works out that for the first 6-7 months, you're not paying really any rent because they're giving you all these incentives to pay, like just to get you in on like a 5-year contract.
Yeah, right.
Because they're fucked. Like Melbourne, that was the most interesting thing during the in-between period of lockdown, open up, then lockdown again, as we went looking for studio space in May. And I'm so fucking thankful we didn't get anything, because landlords were delusional. Like absolutely delusional. And now it's just like it's a buyer or renter's market when it comes to commercial real estate, because no one wants to go back into offices, particularly with Christmas coming up. And I don't know if like people are so used to it that I don't know that it's really going to come back like it was ever again.
Yeah, be careful, Jordan, or you'll get SaaS, studio acquisition syndrome. You'll start looking at 2 or 3. Oh, a 4th one could be good.
I think for a lot of people here, at least, it's just opened up the fact that remote work is a lot easier. Like, we are a purely remote business, so we've got 5 staff. They're all remote in Melbourne, and then 7 freelancers that are around the world, I guess. So Europe and Canada, and it sort of just made us all realize that, you know, maybe you don't need an office, but for me, because it's in our private home studio, this is literally the master bedroom at home. We would like to move it out, and I'd like to move further away from the city, further down the coast, which would be nice. So anyway, let's jump into some rapid fire questions to finish things off.
Sounds good.
Morning, evening routine. Jase, you can kick it off. What does that look like?
Morning routine, wake up. Actually, this is a thing, just a little side note. This is the COVID. This is my biggest thing from COVID is getting a morning routine. I'd hear everybody say it, like, and I was just like, fuck off. That's your shit to sell ebooks. And so this whole COVID thing, I've done a morning routine like very, very heavily. Wake up 5:30, make my coffee in the exact same way with anal precision, and try not to think really any thoughts at all. And then I will read for 1 hour, and then I'll have a shower. I'll sit in my chair. I'll do my 10-minute sit, and then I go to work and I work. And then at night, smoke weed until I fall asleep, or like work until I fall asleep, or the night is pretty cruisy. When I'm not injured, I train basically every single night. But yeah, the morning is like, that's my focus. That's my time. What
about you, Kyrin?
Yeah, so mine is I'll wake up, do 10 minutes of, I grabbed this from Stoic philosophy of negative visualization. Yeah. I'll do that for 10 minutes, as well as like a little bit of gratitude practice, 20 minutes of Wim Hof breathing. And I'll sort of just do the general wake up, clean the teeth, splash water on the face. Then it's 30 minutes of Spanish practice. At the moment, 15 minutes of German, but that'll get up to probably an hour, half an hour reading. And then that's like, okay, now I start the day. And so that'll then get into, whether I'm editing podcasts, doing podcasts, exercising. Yeah.
I find it really interesting that you both meditate in the morning. I don't know why. I've never been one that could meditate in the morning. I do it after I eat in the afternoon. It gives me like a recharge to keep going.
I've experimented all times throughout the day, and I just find if I put it later in the afternoon or evening, it tends to become less essential. It sort of slips in terms of priorities. So for me, it's, put it in the morning and I'll do it.
You always do it. Yeah. Okay. So it's more about consistency.
I'll do I'll do. Oh, sorry to cut you off. I do it in the morning because essentially, like, it's called meditation practice, and you're not supposed to get good at meditating. You're supposed to practice so that then you can get good at life. And I feel like life is what happens after your morning routine. Like, it's very easy to control your morning and have like this perfect little setup, and like shit ain't getting fucked up while you're still in the house in your walls. It's the outside of that where shit gets fucked up. So to me, the idea of it's like I practice for life with meditating. I'm not trying to get good at meditating. I'm trying to get into a headspace where I can like see through the sort of self that causes the problems. And that happens early in the day. And then I just try and carry that mindset through the whole day. And then you're probably a piece of shit by the end of the day. So then you get up in the morning and then you practice your meditation, so that, again, that's practicing for life. And then it's just that sort of repeat. But I like to meditate at night as well. But yeah, it just becomes like if I do it, I do it. If I don't, I don't.
Last question for you guys. If you could have a billboard anywhere, where would it be? First of all, I feel like placement is sort of key to this. So it could be, and let's keep it to Australia, by the way. Where would it be and what would you put on it?
I'll choose just probably the busiest freeway that you could imagine, and the people on it. I'd feel this would apply to the most. I've always liked short and sharp, so this too shall pass. I grabbed that from Marcus Aurelius, but it's probably from even before that as well. Just a little reminder of, whatever you're experiencing right in this present moment, like let alone in 10 years, but 2 minutes, it won't be there. It won't matter.
What about you, Jase?
Yeah, I'd go like the busiest place as well. And I guess it'd say, you are space for the world.
You are space for the world. Okay. That's interesting.
But it'd kind of, the message would get lost, I guess. Like, you'd have to kind of get some context to it. But there is a guy named Douglas Harding, and he wrote a book called On Having No Head. And basically, he just made the very simple observation that every single person sees, is that when you look out into the world, you don't have a head, you just have the world.
Yeah.
So essentially what we are is space for the world. And I think that line of thinking has really, it's something I always try and come back to, in the sense that when I close my eyes, the world goes away. When I open my eyes, that's the space where the world is. And it's changed my thinking of like, I'm not a dude that's in the world anymore. I open my eyes and there is the world. It's my world. This is my world. It's my universe. America's part of it. Guatemala's part of it. The fucking moon is, but like everything is this thing that happens when you open your eyes. So like, we are just the space that the world happens. So it's my world. And then when you open your eyes, it's your world. And everybody has that same experience. So why would you be a cunt to anybody that is in your world? Like, you have a responsibility when you open your eyes to protect the world that is there when, you open your eyes. So I think that if I could have that, like, you are space for the world, and then have people go, what the fuck does that mean? And then actually look into it and have that same philosophy, I think the world would be a better place, because you just don't really want to fuck up your world.
Look into it. Love that.
I can then imagine all the car crashes of people looking into it and then start doing the practice where they're pointing at themselves, letting go of the
wheel. He knows what's up.
Gents, thanks for doing this. Like I said, this is the first sort of podcast roundtable I've had since doing the show. So, I appreciate you both coming on. Where can people find your respective shows and yourselves on the interwebs?
Hopefully the show has done well enough that if you type Gypsy Tales into any platform, it just comes up.
It
so
does.
just do that.
Gypsy Tales, Kyrin.
Nice. Yeah, so for us, we're definitely not at that level, especially because there's a guy out there who has a show called Woodworking for Mere Mortals, who is absolutely
that
huge.
motherfucker.
Yeah, right. So if you type in Mere Mortals Podcast, we're on YouTube, anywhere you look on the podcasting platforms. And then as far as interacting with us, Instagram's the place where we particularly enjoy doing that.
And if you like woodworking, it's Steve Ramsey woodworking for me. He's got his online courses and everything. The #1 resource for beginner woodworkers. Very American. Gents, thank you so much for doing this. We'll make sure we link all of that. But thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode. If you do like it, please subscribe. And of course, like if you're watching the YouTube video as well. We'd really appreciate that. You can also find our Clips channel in the description. For audio, if you're not already listening, you can search Uncommon on Pocket Cast, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts quite easily. For video, if you're not watching, you can search Uncommon on YouTube. And for behind the scenes takes and clips on social media, then definitely check out @uncommon_show on Instagram. But otherwise, look, thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, thanks for listening.